Hello to you, Mike. Wonderful to see you today and to hear a little bit about your story. Do you want to just kick us off with a little bit about who you are, where you're at the moment, and maybe just some current affairs, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. Yeah, good to be with you, Lloyd, and with everyone viewing. Yeah, my name's Mike Betts, and I live on the very furthest easterly point of the UK with my wife, Sue, and we have been married, after next week or the week after. I can't remember when the anniversary is. I need to look that up. 17th of November is the anniversary. We will have been married, I think, 37 years then. We're
Congrats.
both born and raised in the town we're now in Lowestoft, so we've lived here all our lives. I was actually born 4 houses away from where I live, so
Wow.
we're quite close to where we've always been, but travelled a bit. But this is kind of home. So we met each other through a church youth group where there was me and 2 girls. So I had some choice; they had no choice. And ended up marrying one of them. And from there, we went on a little bit of a journey with a group of friends, started in a living room, just seeing God begin to move, and ended up helping plant the church that we're now still part of. And from there, other churches have been planted as we've formed a team over the years with others, working particularly with New Frontiers over time. And today, now, 10 years ago, I founded Relational Mission, which was as a result of Terry Virgo transitioning from his own leadership of New Frontiers and putting, I suppose, giving affirmation to spiritual sons who he considered had an apostolic grace on them to have their own families of churches. So it's, I think the great illustration is a bit like if you have a daughter and she gets married, and she has a maiden name, but then she has a married name, but it's still the same, still the same family. So we're now called Relational Mission, but we're, as it were, from the loins of New Frontiers, and it's our sort of married name or next stage name of the family tree. And there's around, I think, 75 or so churches part of Relational Missions, quite a number of which would be church plants, and others would be established churches which we've either planted or adopted over the years. And we mostly started and began to work in the UK and then into the mainland of Europe, but now we're in a phase where all sorts of connections are opening up in different parts of the world. And so, yeah, that's pretty much how we are. We've got one son who's married, and we've got one granddaughter who's going to be 4 soon, and another granddaughter on the way who's due around about Christmas time. So that's us. And we've got someone we call our daughter in the Lord, who the Lord gave to us to really journey with as a family. And she'd been living with us for about 14 years. And so we're very blessed in that regard.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's wonderful hearing that analogy of the married name and all that. I'd never heard of that before. That's brilliant way to put it, and makes it sound really natural and living. I'd love it if you could just maybe walk us through that stage 10 years ago when New Frontiers went into various spheres, and I guess your part in that and how you went through that. Maybe just take us through some of the decisions you had to make, some of the things that went really well, some of the things that didn't go so well, and just help us to learn from that time.
Yes, well, I think a few thoughts that just come straight to mind would be, one is, I think Terry, it was a master stroke of leadership to do what he did rather than look for a successor, because I think if you look for a successor, particularly when you're in a situation where people are gathered because they want to be with you, if you suddenly put a successor there who they might love and appreciate, but they're not necessarily got the same relational buy-in, they're following because you've asked them to, rather than because there's a natural sort of heart voluntary connection. So I think when he invited, I think there was about, 15 or 20 of us to begin to form our own families of churches, that was quite a vulnerable moment for all of us who were asked or invited to do that, because basically all of the churches in New Frontiers were given the freedom to go wherever they wanted. So, it wasn't going to be geographical or tied to whoever you had some relationship with in the past. Everyone was free to go everywhere. And so, that's you kind of think, am I going to actually have anybody at the end of this process? Is anyone going to want to come with me? And so it's quite a humbling and I suppose a good process for any leader to go through, to realize we don't lead by right, we don't lead by title, we don't lead by anything other than the grace of God, the influence that God gives us through the call of God on our lives. And a dear friend of mine, one of my spiritual fathers, I asked him about this situation when it was all beginning to happen. And I said, what, how do I navigate this? And he said to me, very wise, he said, I want you to think about the muskox. Well, that's a bit weird. So he said, a muskox just stands in a field and it gives off an odor. It just gives off a smell because it's a muskox and it's got its own smell. And he said other muskox who are attracted to that muskox will smell the smell and they will recognize it, it'll resonate with them. And they will do anything to get in the field with that muskox because they recognize the smell. And he said, all you've got to do is stand in a field and smell. And I thought, wow, I get the picture. And basically he was saying that, you don't want to be thinking to yourself, I've got people with me who'd rather be with someone else, because you're always looking then over your shoulder to think, is everybody happy? And that's no way to lead anything. So I can honestly say that everyone who is in relational mission wants to be there. And, if at some point people don't feel they want to be there because they found someone else who smells better, then I'd want to be very releasing of that, because you can't build anything unless people actually really want to be together. So that was a crucial phase, and you can't hurry that phase because I think some people jumped to decisions very quickly and then thought afterwards, not sure I perhaps should have done that quickly. So I think there's some people you lose who you think you're going to keep, and others you gain who you didn't know that you would. So I think there's a vulnerability in that, but I think it was an essential phase. I think in terms of what I then decided to do, again, much of the decisions I've made have been either made because I've had prophetic word that people have given me to give me an indication of what decisions to make, or just the wise counsel of godly fathers and mothers in God over the years who've given me insights that I've then tried to build to, which I think is a crucial thing. I'd much rather have godly mothers and fathers than I would read a book. I mean, I love reading books, but I think there's something about the incarnated wisdom of someone who's lived or done more than you, who can help you. And one such bit of wisdom I had was make sure you surround yourself with people who energize you when it comes to in terms of building team. Because if you have people in the team who ought to be there, or who you think, well, I suppose they need to be there, and don't really click, but will be there because or people to make up the numbers, or people who've been there before, and So they said to me, be really radical and clear with this, that only surround yourself with people who energize you. That doesn't mean it's people who always agree with you, because there's many people who don't agree with me, but I'm energized because there's a friendship, there's a commitment together. So it's not about yes men or women, anything like that. It's about knowing that there's an energy when you walk in the room and that person's there and you think, oh, I'm so glad to be with that person. And I think that's kept me sane and it's kept me going when times have been difficult. And it's, I think, helped us be more fruitful than we would have been if I was trying to make all the decisions myself and then just disseminate information. So I would say those are quite key things. And I do operate to a particular philosophy of ministry, but I can come back to that, or mention that at some other point as we talk. But those were things that strike me as in those early days were relevant.
Okay. Were there any things that you, when you look back, you think maybe I would have done that slightly differently? Or maybe you've even talked about it before. You said, yeah, we did that. We could have done this. Any of those reflections that maybe would be helpful for any church leader or anyone in business that going through transition on a large scale that might just really help them and serve them?
I think two things sort of are constant battles, I think, for me. One is getting used to not being able to meet everybody's expectations, and realizing that I am going to let more and more people down as everything gets bigger. All you're going to do is disappoint more people. And that, for someone who's I'm quite relational in terms of I want to help people and be with people, and but I perhaps overestimated what I would be able to deliver person to person. So, for example, if I can think of one church, I think, where we lost, they moved on elsewhere because I started off serving them in a certain way. I don't know, so many visits or so many this or so many that, to help them in the foundational stage of what they were doing. And then there came a point where I said, actually, I don't think I need to come so much now, but I've got someone else who I think can come and do a different sort of thing to add in where I think they can supplement what I've brought now, which is what team is all about. But I think they struggled, thinking that I was sort of abandoning them, which I wasn't. But I didn't probably start as I meant to go on. We had mismatched expectations. And I think that's often something I've perhaps not got quite right. So I'm trying to be more diligent about being clear in setting expectations. Although even when you try to do that, it still doesn't always work. So I think expectation levels were one thing. There was just such a lot of demand being pulled in all sorts of directions, particularly when we were forming something, and everything's seemingly has got to be done at once. And I think I probably carried more hurriedness in my spirit than was good, because I felt, got to do this, got to do this, got to do this. Whereas that wasn't coming from God. That was coming from, again, sort of, I suppose, a sense of not wanting to let people down or trying to please people or feeling that you had to get this done, otherwise this person would be unhappy or whatever. So it took me a while to realize, God wanted my attention, my time. He wanted my attention and my time, and they're different things, although they complement each other. And so I've had to reprogram my responses, which is a continual thing, but I think I'm better at it than I was. I'm older, for a start, 10 years older than when we started. So I think I just can't run that fast now. Anyway. So yeah, those would be okay. Criticism, I think, is another. Just when you first encounter higher levels of criticism because you're doing something a bit more prominent, even though we're not a big movement at all, but nevertheless it's still you're still doing slightly more than you were visibly, I suppose. That that can be a bit testing, just to get used to that and not wanting to be scrutinized, feeling you'd rather hide.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. It's really great that you've been honest and open on that. I think that'll really serve people. Just briefly, what was the one highlight of that time? If you can just bring out one something that really just sits with you today as something you really just brought joy to your spirit, and you always look back on as, wow, God really just smiled on us at that time.
Well, I think it would. I mean, there are a number of things. So, but just to pick one that comes straight to mind, I would say the quality of men and women working with me is astonishing. I mean, they make me look far better than I actually am. And the levels of commitment, loyalty, buy-in, commitment to each other, friendship in the midst of vision, hard work, covering each other's backs, strengthening each other, helping each other when we need a bit of, brotherly admonition, that sort of stuff. I have been remarkably, it's been the toughest 10 years of ministry, but the most rewarding at the same time. So the two have gone together. And I think the quality of the team around me is extraordinary. And that's been one of the highlights of life, I would treasure that. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. That's wonderful. Just love to roll the clock forward a little bit, maybe just in chronological order, and just before the current, I guess you've had a period where you started up an initiative called Prayers of Many, Enough. I'd love if you can just maybe just talk a little bit about that, how that first began, how you began it, how you grew it, some things that went right, some things went wrong, anything in between that you think would just really serve people going through change, starting things, and I guess putting them out into the public arena where they can be criticized, taken on board, or loved, hated, and everything in between.
Yeah, well, it started with just me and a Bible, which often
good starting point.
Exactly. And I just read 2 Corinthians 1:11, where Paul was facing a lot of difficulty. He was writing to the Corinthians about the troubles he'd had in Asia and the pressures and all the rest of it. And I noticed that he could have asked for money, reinforcements, a sabbatical, a fresh strategic team input. All of those things would have been very, very, understandable. But he said to them in that verse, "You also must help us by prayer, so that many will give thanks on our behalf for the blessing granted in answer to the prayers of many." And so it struck me that when his back was against the wall, and that's really when you see what someone's made of and what they value, what he valued was corporate prayer. That was the thing he wanted. And it wasn't like the prayers of specialists. So he didn't say, give Epaphras a ring who wrestles in prayer, him and the intercessory team, they need to get on board. He didn't say that. He said, you, the whole church. He's writing to the church, to Corinth. He said, you also. And prayers of many. So something clicked in my head, and I thought, hang on a minute. Large scale corporate prayer in local church life is an engine room that Paul thought more important than anything else for the success of his apostolic mission. And I thought, we're not doing that. And I don't know anyone else who is in the Western world, to be honest. I can see it in other parts of the globe, not in the West. There probably are places I don't know about, but it's certainly not frequent or common. And then I read Jonathan Edwards' book. I think providentially that just sort of landed in my lap, An Humble Attempt, where he describes how he got churches he was connected with to pray every Monday night for a month for 7 years. It was an explicit agreement, praying for the same things, visible union, all at the same time, same date, but different locations, and extraordinary prayer. So not a routine prayer meeting, but like this is in the sense of occasion. And William Carey picked that up from him sometime later and probably had more success with it even than Edwards did. But in both cases, revival flowed and great moves of God flowed from that sustained corporate prayer. So we had a bit of a team meeting. I gathered people around me just to share what I was feeling and say, look, let's just dream a bit. What might it look like if we tried to I didn't want to inject a program or an event. I wanted to change a culture. Now that's a key thing because unless you change a culture, then an event will come and go. And changing culture takes many years. So I knew this wasn't a quick fix. I knew this was something that was going to take us a long while. Certainly at least 7 years was our commitment was 7 years, same as Edwards. And so we designed how we were going to do it, and we were going to get churches in hubs all across relational mission, meet on a Friday night 3 times a year, very fast-paced, interactive. We threw money at it. I would say if you're going to do a prayer meeting, do it well. You have to pay. It costs money to make it interesting, fast-paced, the video production and all sorts of stuff. You got to really invest key people and key resources to make this something that will become so attractive to people that it will get into them as a culture changing way of viewing things. Now, the first one we did, I wasn't, to be honest, I wasn't sure if anybody was going to turn up. I mean, my wife and I went to our hub, but we didn't have any, just no idea. But there was over 2,000 people turned up to the first one, and I thought, oh, this is surprising. And so we built on that over the following years, and we built also in terms of then gradually people started to see it from outside and say, oh, we quite like this, tell us about it. And now originally I thought everyone was going to join enough, which is what we called it. And we just have this huge thing with the branding and all the rest of it. But actually what happened was people came and looked at what we were doing and then designed their own. Now, to me, that's more success rather than building a brand, because it shows that there's a cultural shift going on in someone. And if they can create their own thing that they feel they've produced, then they're not just using someone else's, clothes. They've designed their own made to measure thing that they feel has been burst from their own spiritual loins, as it were. So that's, I think it influenced probably quite a few people in different places. And then in the pandemic, probably a couple more things to note. In the pandemic, where we couldn't meet physically, we thought, let's put it all online. And we met once a month for 3 months at the height of the pandemic, and particularly prayed for a vaccine, actually. We prayed for a vaccine to come through miraculously quickly. And I still believe to this day that some of the progress we've seen in the world in terms of vaccine production owes itself to the fact we prayed in large numbers, and we prayed.
It's remarkable.
We reached between. It was difficult. The numbers were difficult to be exactly clear on, but we were at the height. We were in 41 nations, praying all at the same time. Well, time zones. Same agenda, same time in your time zone, and explicit agreement, visible union, sort of thing. And it was certainly between 6,500 and 10,000 people each time we did that. And so we've scaled it back to relational mission again now. And the other thing that came out of it is I put it into a book called The Prayers of Many, which even that now is being translated into numbers of languages. So we've just had it done in Hindi. And we're hoping to get it done in Farsi. We've had it done in Dutch and German. We're hoping to get it done in Spanish, Japanese. It's been done in Japanese, I think. So there's a number of translations of it. So it feels like it's having an effect beyond us. If you were to ask me, have we changed the culture? I would still have to say no, but I think we have made a dent in it. And certainly corporate prayer is much more on the agenda now within the circles of our influence than it was before. So I think there's still a long way to go, but it's a start.
Oh, fantastic. Has there been any pushback on this adventure from any quarters that you've noted, or any strong encouragements? Just briefly.
I think there was a lot of scratching of heads at first. People were thinking, why is he choosing to do this? Rather than something you can tangibly measure. And I suppose then I had to sort of really think, well, what do I believe? And we may well not see the answers to the things that we've asked for some years, because they're like seeds, aren't they, in the ground? They don't all germinate at once. So I think that I had to hold my nerve at certain points, because I could see others doing a lot of very, very visibly fruitful things, and we were putting a lot of effort and money into praying, which isn't obviously immediately fruitful.
Okay. Well, that's wonderful. It's a wonderful journey that you've been on. Just now, maybe transitioning into the now. I know Relational Mission's gone through a few changes recently. Maybe you want to just tell us a little bit about that, how that came about, because I know there's been a bit of prophetic activity that led to it. It wasn't just someone's idea. and how it's going. You're obviously in the middle of it now, so it's maybe you can be a bit more objective and also sensitive, because people also, it's actual real lives are being moving in different directions. So just talk through that. What's gone well, maybe other things that at the very start you could have done differently, or just talk through it.
Yeah, well, I mean, my personal philosophy of ministry is strongly biased towards raising up spiritual sons and daughters in the nations, multiplying apostolic spheres. So my sort of fruitfulness and my enjoyment, my sense of fulfillment comes if I think I've helped to multiply, produce after my own kind, if you like. So right from the get-go, my vision and my end game has always been to multiply more ministry that would go further than me, be more gifted than me, that would achieve the vision, rather than it coming through me. And so a little bit of military strategy has helped me, learning the difference between command and control, which is everything comes back to me and I just tell people what to do, and then mission command, which is typified by, for example, Lord Nelson, who would have his harness thinking around his dinner table, and he'd get experienced officers and younger officers together. Anyone was allowed to say anything as they considered battle strategy. There was no right or wrong answers. They ate together, they became friends together, they built bonds together, and they considered strategy. And the reason he did it that way was when they were on the seas and spread out in different places and couldn't see each other, and you couldn't do command and control because people weren't visible. They'd spent so much time around the table forming their doctrine, their values, their philosophy of ministry and in warfare, that when they got out on the high seas, they all knew instinctively what they would do. They all instinctively fought a certain way. And so what you do is you produce far more than if you could just do it yourself and tell people what to do. So that as a backdrop, I've then right in this next phase of relational mission, I've been looking for emerging apostolic gifts that I can recognize and release alongside me, which I've now done in Steph Liston and Maurice Nightingale. Although Maurice and I have worked together for many years, and Steph likewise is a very senior leader. They're not sort of sons, as it were. They're more peers. Well, I suppose Steph, perhaps I've had more involvement in a sort of forming stage, as it were. He's a bit younger. Well, a lot younger, he'd want me to say, but you know what I mean. I think in that stage, it was about me recognizing what was already emerging. But behind them, we've got a whole raft of men and women coming through with different translocal gifts that I think will help multiply relational mission. So I, after having spent 10 years building relational mission, I suppose in one sense I was leading it and I had a team helping me. We've now dismantled that. So that actually is quite a moment for me, because you think I've spent 10 years building something and you dismantle it and release Maurice, Steph and myself to, and a number of other guys behind them who are looking after churches now, and saying to them, right, build your own organizational structures that will serve your particular contribution to the collective mission that is relational mission. So I've got a blank sheet of paper for the next phase of my life, and I've handed over basically everything I was doing, and we've deconstructed how we were doing it. So you have to have a philosophy that isn't trying to build it to yourself, or I don't think you'd ever make those choices. So I'm thankful that God, I think, has wired me that way. So although it is a loss, and you're a bit nervous, thinking, well, what do I do now? Although there is plenty going on, but there's that little moment of, dear, is this good thing? But then you get prophetic stuff to encourage you, and you just know it's the right thing.
Brilliant. Can you tell us a little bit about a little bit of the prophetic that really encouraged you, really just helped you stay the journey rather than blinking?
Well, there was one particular one. We had numbers of them really, but there was one particular one from Steve Oliver, and that was in 2018 at the New Frontiers Global Gathering of Apostles. And he just wandered over to me in a prayer time, and he had no idea that what I was thinking about doing, which was along these lines. And he said, "I see an ocean-going yacht, and it's cutting through the waves. It's doing, sailing well, going at good speed, etc., etc." And he said, "But the picture's changed, and now I can see a trimaran, 3 hulls, not a monohull, a trimaran." And he said, "I think God is going to take relational mission through a transition where you change from a monohull to a trimaran." And that's exactly what we've done. There's 3 of us, there's 3 hulls, but it's still one boat. And the point of it was not only about the multiplication, but he said, if you are patient with it and learn how to sail it, it's different from sailing a monohull. There's more space, there's more crew, there's different ways of managing all the rigging and all the dynamics of sailing it. And you've got to be patient with it, learn how to sail with it. But if you do, you'll take far more people with you, and it'll have much more breadth, length, and distance. It will go further because it's built for a greater capacity than the original monohull. So that was quite a foundational word, really, and a beautiful image that we were able to then communicate the change to the churches using an image that's easily memorable.
Oh, that's fantastic. I think we'll end up there. That's been a really good journey of 10 or 15 years just through your life and all the lessons. So I just want to thank you, Mike, for taking the time and sharing that.
That's great. It's good to be with you. I hope that's of some help to people.